Hello, welcome to the History of Slavery at the University of Georgia 2021 Symposium on Recognition, Reconciliation, and Redress. My name is Chana Kai Lee, and I am an Associate Professor of History and African American Studies at the University of Georgia and a member of the Symposium Planning Committee. We are so pleased to welcome you here today for this exciting and important event. This is the first symposium of its kind at the University of Georgia, and we have an excellent 2 days of panel conversations, presentations, and performances. The event today has been made possible by a small but dedicated team that planned this symposium, and they will each take part in our introductory remarks today. That team includes Linda Davis, educator, preservationist, and co-convener for Athens Community Agenda. Kimberly Davis, journalist, researcher, and member of the boards of the Morton Theater Corporation, Historic Athens, and Friends of Brooklyn Cemetery. Dr. Scott Nesbitt, University of Georgia College of Environment and Design and the History Department. Dr. Jennifer Rice, University of Georgia Geography Department. Dr. Jane McPherson, University of Georgia School of Social Work. Dr. James Brooks, University of Georgia History Department and Gable Chair in American History. Amy Andrews, University of Georgia Master's Student in Historic Preservation. Our goals for this 2-day event are to share some of the research that has been done on the histories of slavery at the University of Georgia, to hear from community members about their work for racial justice, and to create a space for a genuine and thoughtful conversation about how we might confront and dismantle the enduring structures of white supremacy that exist in our nation, the Athens community, and on the University of Georgia's campus. We are very thankful for the generous sponsors from many units and organizations at the University of Georgia, including the Special Collections Libraries, the Wilson Center for Humanities and Arts, the Institute for African American Studies, the School of Social Work, the College of Environment and Design, the Departments of History, Geography, and Anthropology, the Gable Chair in History, and the UGA Student Historic Preservation Organization. A special thank you goes to Historic Athens for providing community screening of the event at Fire Hall number 2. And finally, some funding for the symposium was provided by the Documenting the History of Slavery at the University of Georgia 1785 to 1865 grant administered by the University of Georgia's Office of the Vice President for Research. Again, welcome. We are so happy to share this event with you. Now, I would like to turn it over to the other members of our planning committee to provide more information about today's events.
Thank you, Shauna. I'd like to begin by saying we hope that this is the first of many such symposiums. We have been very thankful for the widespread interest in being a part of this event from those on the University of Georgia campus, the Athens-Clarke County community, and even other parts of the country. We'd like to share some information on the structure of the symposium and instructions for you, our audience. First, all information about the event can be found on the symposium website, slaveryatuga.org. That's slaveryatuga.org. A schedule can be located under the Agenda tab. There, we have provided a schedule at a glance and a link to a PDF with the full program information, including session descriptions and speaker bios. Those viewing the symposium using the Zoom webinar link provided through registration will have the opportunity as part of most sessions to submit written questions to the panelists using a Q&A box on the bottom of your viewing screen. A moderator will receive the questions and, time permitting, select which ones to read to the panelists. Most of our sessions will be recorded and made available for future viewing through a link on the website. They will also be archived at the University of Georgia Hargret Rare Book and Manuscript Library. Please feel free to share your enthusiasm for sessions or presenters using social media. You can tag us using the hashtag HSUGA2021.
We're also streaming the symposium on a YouTube channel. The link to that is provided on our webpage. You cannot submit questions using this method of viewing, but this allows us to expand our audience beyond the 500-person maximum allowed by the Zoom webinar technology we're using. There will be 15-minute breaks between most sessions and a lunch break. This is to allow you time to get up and stretch, and as importantly, it allows us time to transition between speakers. We're very excited to have several performances from community members and organizations as part of this event, including 15 minutes of restorative practice and movement by Nina Gilreath at 12:30 p.m. on Friday, as well as a demonstration of the Athens Area Black History Bowl and performance of Joyful Joyful by the East Athens Dance Center Performance Group on Saturday, starting at 4:45 p.m.
We have a total of 14 amazing sessions and more than 50 speakers and participants over these 2 days. We would like to thank all of our presenters who are generously sharing their knowledge and experiences. We believe the collective knowledge about and experiences of racism and white supremacy held among those who have come together as part of the symposium must play a larger role in the ways that the University of Georgia shapes its future.
This symposium is one of many projects that seek to recognize the ways that slavery is deeply woven into the history of the University of Georgia. While the university itself did not own enslaved people, it benefited from the institution of slavery and from the labor of enslaved people. The many who built and maintained the campus, those who served UGA students, faculty, and administrators throughout the antebellum period. Over the decades, there have been many instances when the ongoing legacies and injustices of slavery at UGA have been made visible and visceral. The handling of human remains unearthed during the Baldwin Hall expansion, many of whom were of African descent and likely enslaved or formerly enslaved persons, is a prime example.
The study of the history of slavery at the University of Georgia did not start and does not end with this symposium. The struggle for recognition, reconciliation, and redress of racial injustice has been ongoing for centuries. These 2 days are another step in this direction, and we are very happy to have you with us. The organizers and participants of this symposium are indebted to countless individuals and groups who have sought to bring light to issues of discrimination and racism at the University of Georgia, in Athens-Clarke County, and throughout our communities. Nothing we have done here would be possible without them.
Push for the University of Georgia to recognize, reconcile, and redress the historical and contemporary impacts of slavery and on Athens will continue. And this symposium is understood as the first of many such engagements with the university and the greater community. The Symposium on Recognition, Reconciliation, and Redress seeks to do this work right here on the University of Georgia campus, even if it is virtually this year, by creating the place for us to discuss and strategize meaningful actions for transformative change and racial justice.
Thank you for your attention during this introduction to the inaugural history of the slavery at the University of Georgia Symposium. To a person, this planning committee has demonstrated a patient, persistent, and firm commitment to this cause and to create an engaging experience for our panelists and especially you, our audience. We say this with special recognition to Jennifer Rice and Amy Andrews. We recognize and applaud the significance of the work that is embodied in research, analysis, and actions of the panelists. We are excited to offer this important platform for expression, revelation, and knowledge sharing. This is just the beginning for bringing this talent together. The work began before today, and we hope it will continue with greater support as we move forward. Please visit the website and share your follow-up thoughts and comments. Thank you and enjoy the symposium.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to our second day of the History of Slavery at the University of Georgia Symposium on Recognition, Reconciliation, and Redress. My name is Jennifer Rice, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Geography and a member of the Symposium Planning Committee. I hope you were able to view some or all of our sessions yesterday. What a thought-provoking, informative, powerful, and touching set of presentations. I know we will experience the same here today. Two quick announcements I'd like to make before kicking off this session. First, I'd like to specifically mention the resources tab on our website, slaveryatuga.org, slaveryatuga.org. We've provided several useful web links related to the themes of the symposium. We also just added a link to view the Tour of North Campus film that was premiered at a session yesterday. I encourage you to check out this page of our website at some point soon. Second, I want to mention that the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, AADM, will hold an Athens Day of Jubilee Vigil and Rally on Tuesday, May 4th at 6 p.m. More information on their website, aadmovement.org. Okay, I am thrilled to be the moderator for our first session today, Town and Gown, Relations and Racism. We will have two 15-minute presentations followed by questions from the audience. Our first presentation is entitled Cartographies of Dispossession, Collaboratively Mapping Linnentown. Presenters include Dr. Jerry Shannon, who is an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Financial Planning, Housing, and Consumer Economics, and the director of the UGA Community Mapping Lab. Jerry will be joined by Aidan Hysjulien, who is a PhD candidate in the Department of Geography at the University of Georgia. And Ms. Hattie Thomas Whitehead is here. She also contributed to the work they will present. Ms. Thomas Whitehead is a first descendant of Linnentown and also chair of both the Linnentown Project and the Athens-Clarke County Justice and Memory Committee. Our second presentation is entitled, We Worked at UGA but Never Attended UGA, a participatory action study examining the relationship with Black communities in the University of Georgia. Presenters include Reshonda Breeden, who is a doctoral candidate in the College of Student Affairs Administration PhD program at the University of Georgia. She will be joined by Aniya Willis, who is an Athens, Georgia native and a second-year biology and biochemistry student at the University of Georgia. And Tavaria Smith also contributed to this work, though she's not able to be with us today. Tavaria is also an Athens, Georgia native and a graduating senior at the University of Georgia majoring in African-American studies. I'm excited to welcome you all here today for these fantastic presentations. If you are viewing on the webinar, please enter your questions in the Q&A box as you think of them. And with pleasure, I now turn it over to our first presentation.
All right, thank you so much. I'm excited to present to you all today along with Aidan and Hattie. Again, my name is Jerry Shannon. I'm in Departments of Geography and Financial Planning, Housing, and Consumer Economics here at University of Georgia. And I'm going to talk to you today about a collaborative project we did last spring around the Linnentown neighborhood here in Athens. So let me go ahead and move forward a slide here. So many of you might already be familiar with the Linnentown neighborhood, but if you're not, let me just give you a quick overview. This was a historically African-American neighborhood that existed just west of campus. So there's a map here. You can see this is the campus area. The stadium stands out pretty well. It basically exists where the parking deck and freshman dorms, freshman high-rises currently exist. And in the early 1960s, it was demolished using urban renewal funds. Residents were displaced, and we'll talk more about that process in a second. But recently, the Linnentown Project and a group of former residents have been working to seek redress for that displacement and to bring to light some of the actions that happened during that process. And so what our goal was, I teach a class every spring called Community GIS, or most springs called Community GIS. And our class sought to partner with the Linnentown Project to take some of the records that had already been digitized, primarily from special collections, combine them with some other sources of data that we'll talk about in a second. We talked with former residents to get the knowledge that they had about the neighborhood, and to use that to develop a more robust picture of the neighborhood that could be used in this effort to seek broader redress and reparations for the events that happened around the destruction of the Linnentown neighborhood. So that was the primary goal of this process. So let me walk you through the data that we used. So first of all, as I mentioned, there was multiple maps for this project, which was an urban renewal project that received federal funding from the university libraries. One of those was just maps, right? So we have, for example, here a map of the two urban renewal areas in Athens. There was also one just north of downtown as well. But this was the R50 project that included the Linnentown neighborhood that was here, along with a nearby white neighborhood, and we'll talk more about that again in a second. This is a close-up of that area, and this is actually a really interesting map because you can see the kind of areas getting scratched out as the redevelopment process was taking hold. And then up here, you can't see it, but there's names of the residents who lived in those homes and more information about them. So part of it was us just digitizing these maps and trying to make these data into something that could be mapped out in a GIS, in an online computer mapping software. Right. We also then talked with former residents of Linnentown. So we had a focus group where we took some of the data that we had digitized, some of the other information that we had, and asked them to annotate it, talk about what was right in those records, what was off about those records, which is actually quite a bit, as you can see from the comments listed here, and help us understand kind of their memories of the neighborhood and how that could get incorporated into the maps that we were developing. I think that was, for many folks, the highlight of this whole experience of collaboration was this conversation that happened about halfway through the course. We also had from those archival records a bunch of data on the relocation of residents. So that included things like where they ended up, records that look like this. There were surveys that were done of families prior to displacement that had a rating of the property. We incorporated that into a spreadsheet that could be used to map out where places were rated, included sales prices in many cases, and we'll see, we have a model later on that talks about that. And then there's also quite a bit of correspondence about this project between folks at UGA, in many cases folks in Washington, so Richard Russell shows up quite a few times, about the redevelopment of this project, and that's something that we looked at as well. And then lastly, we drew from, to get some historical perspective, 1940 census microdata. So every 72 years, the census releases the full records of every census survey. So we've got literally every single person who lived in Athens and across the country from 1940. That's the most recent census microdata that we have. So we get to get a snapshot of what Linnentown looked like in 1940, as well as what things looked like in 1963. And that was useful for us to get a sense of how the neighborhood was changing up prior to displacement. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aidan, and he's going to talk about the first part of this project.
Thanks, Jerry. So one of the places to start then here is to think about how did UGA justify and use urban renewal? So really centrally it was about using urban renewal as this tool for mobilizing state power as a way to acquire property in a really central area of Athens around the university for its cleared land appraisal value. So what this allowed the university to do is to acquire this property that was appraised in total at $667,000 for about $400,000 less at $216,000. So it's clearly about getting this land for a cheap price, devaluing this property. And so what this allowed the university and the university system to do is expand operations and really grow its wealth. So that $216,000 that was spent to purchase this property, well, that same land that was part of this R50 development, now its appraised land value without anything else on it is $14,700,000. So just in appraisal of our appreciation of land values, this has been a percent change of 6,675%. So thinking about the next slide, we can see some of the language that UGA uses to justify this process. We see consistently throughout the administrators, especially Dean Adderhold, drawing on these rhetorics of progress, of common good, of economic gain that will be brought by this boundless growth of the university. As we know, in practice, these were deeply exclusionary visions of the common good, of progress, and of who was going to be gaining economically. We also see this very clear language of framing Linnentown as a total slum that just needed to be removed, a deeply racialized language that we see throughout urban renewal in the United States. So we know, though, that Linnentown was not a total slum. It was a space where Black wealth was actively being built in a valuable part of town. As one of the residents, Geneva Johnson, remembers it, early on in this process, her father went to talk to UGA and told them, I don't want to leave. I'm fixing up my house. He was putting in a bathroom, working on the porch, investing that money that he was making from working at the university back into this property to build wealth for himself, for his family, for generations to come was the hope. And so we see very clearly that in Linnentown, there was an increase in home ownership. we look at the maps comparing 1940 census to the removal records, we can see very clearly a pattern of a shift from renting to home ownership, especially around Linden Row. So how did the university then manage to displace these new homeowners? Well, they used this spatial strategy of encirclement. So they began this process in early 63, and one of the early justifications was, oh, we already have this property in the area, so it only makes sense that we expand on it. And some of the first properties that the university owned here was this large square parcel in the north, which the university acquired in the 50s. It is where Jewel Academy once stood, which was a school for Black Athenians. Once the university acquired the property, they very quickly shut down the school. They also had this large triangular parcel up in the east. Another way that they said, oh, we have all this land, we're going to continue. So by the end of 63, the university had really consolidated their ownership in the north and begin some of these incursions, especially into the area between Peabody and Linden Row. As Geneva remembers it, they were forced out in 1964, but up until then, they were consistently told, your house needs to be demolished. It can't be standing, it's unlivable. At the same time, they were also burning property nearby, making it unlivable. And clearly, her house didn't just need to be demolished, she's still living in it today. Now, if we go to end of 1964, this is when the university really aggressively moves to encircle Linnentown, moving up from the south and really putting pressure on these people and increasingly making it unlivable here. As another former resident, Christine Johnson, remembers, being woken up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. with her mother and child to bulldozers being run outside, moving around dirt, making ditches, and being consoled by her mother, saying, just relax, they're not going to hit the house. And while they may not have hit the house, by 1965, the university had almost completed this displacement and acquisition. There were just a few holdouts left. And we see from this documentation in 1965 of this house being burned, and saying it's being burned to put in the sewer lines that were only getting built now that the university was constructing its facilities there. And so by the end of 1966, the university had completed this process of acquisition, of moving people off of their property, and transforming what was once Linnentown into what we see now in 2020, just a parking lot. And so that was the way the university was going to achieve common good for all Georgians, transform this space of building Black wealth into a parking lot for students and faculty. So I'm going to pass it back to Jerry now. Thanks.
Thanks, Aidan. So one of the other questions that we tried to answer is whether Linnentown owners received a fair price for their property. This has been one of the arguments, is that that folks did receive compensation for moving out. And so we have records for about half, 63 out of the 117 properties that were moved, both in Linnentown and in the adjacent neighborhood north of Baxter Street. The majority of those properties, as you can see here, were condemned. There were a few that were sold. We looked at the price per square meter of land because the university bought the land. It did not buy the structure. That was in the correspondence that Aidan posted earlier. They were buying it based on the appraised value of the land. And so if you do that, you can see just on the surface that Linnentown residents who were in properties that were condemned received on average $6.79 per square meter of land area. Outside of Linnentown, that figure was considerably higher, about 50% higher, around $9 per square meter. We might ask whether that's we can control for some other factors, right? So we ran a simple regression model where we said, let's look at the sale price, or the price that people received if the property was condemned, as an outcome variable, and then look at what was the area of that parcel, thinking that people who have more area would get a higher price. Was it sold or condemned, and was it inside Linnentown or not? And what we saw, the two items that were significant here were parcel area. So on average, bigger parcels got more money, and that makes sense. But we also saw that those folks who lived outside Linnentown, on average, received $6,718 more based on this regression model. for their properties than people inside Linnentown did. This is a pretty robust model. The R-square was 0.53, right? If we were to translate that into dollars today, that's $58,151 difference for the equivalent amount of land area. So there's a significant financial hit that folks inside Linnentown took as a part of this process. When we start thinking about reparations or redress, I think that's a number that matters, right, in terms of what we're paying attention to. The last question we try to answer is, where did folks go after being displaced out of the neighborhood? There's folks who moved outside of Athens. Several folks moved to Atlanta. One person moved to Cincinnati. But if we look just in Athens, these are the general locations, at least the records that we have. You can see there's quite a bit on Baxter Street. This is up around the Hancock corridor, and then over around what's now Nellie B. Several folks listed there. There's a few other folks around the county, but those were the real clusters. If we overlay data from 1970, we can see that these folks were moving to areas that were already predominantly African American, right? And so these are spaces that over time have been systematically devalued. And so if we think about, again, the financial implications of this, moving from an area that had quite a bit of financial value that the university and the city worked together to acquire for its prime position within the city, to areas where the opportunities for wealth gain were potentially fewer because of the segregated nature of the city already. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there. There's obviously a lot to this project, and look forward to chatting in Q&A more about this. You can look at the redress for Linnentown.com, which is the Linnentown project site. We also have some information about this on the Community Mapping Lab site, including more clickable and interactive maps, so you can check that out as well. Look forward to chatting in the Q&A, and we'll wrap up there. Thanks so much.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is Aniya Willis. I want to acknowledge my co-researcher. She couldn't be here today, but she's preparing to graduate from here. And she majored in African American Studies with a double minor in Women's Studies in Spanish. I'm a rising junior majoring in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, and we worked with Dr. Breeden on our project. We worked at UGA, but we never attended UGA, a PAR study examining relationships between Black communities and the University of Georgia. And so, with enslavement of Black Athenians, below bottom documentary, and the displacement of the Linnentown community, this was kind of like our, you could say, our foundation or our building blocks of our research project. So we kind of just wanted to expand on that since we already knew, just learn more about the community. And now I'm going to pass it to Dr. Breeden.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Reshonda Breeden, and I am a current doc student graduating this May. And like Aniya said, what we have to share today is part of a larger dissertation study. And so I could go on and on about the methodology and theory, but we really want to get to the findings, because part of this project is honoring the voices of Black communities and moving towards action, okay? So I will quickly say that Spirit basically led us to this conversation. We went to a session with Hattie Thomas Whitehead. We went to a few workshops on campus, and Spirit and our lived experiences brought us here. And we knew that there were some interesting dynamics, but there was a truth there that was so in our bones that we had to discuss it. And so we were interested in hearing from families. So in my dissertation project, I recruited 2 Black undergraduate co-researchers, Aniya and Tavaria. And we went on to interview Black undergrads, brilliant Black undergrads, brilliant Black community leaders, and brilliant Black focus groups to answer our research questions. How does history intersect between Black communities and UGA? And how do Black communities experience and make meaning with UGA? And let me say, the data is so incredibly rich. We laughed, we cried. And so we promised to share as much as we can today. And hopefully the findings will be available at a stage play in the future, coming to Athens possibly this summer. And so I'll start with the first question. The first question was, how does history intersect between Black communities and the University of Georgia? And so from this question, Black communities and families in this study, they discussed a lot of things that contributed to their strained relationships. Folks talked about being Linnentown descendants, and we just heard from the presenters before us how their land was devalued, their personhood was devalued, there was bulldozers outside of homes, and folks in this study talked about knowing this about the university all their lives and going to that house and seeing that house and saying, okay, that's what the university took from us. Folks talked about integration and how they took care of Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Homes when the university didn't want them there. Folks talked about their families working at UGA, but them never visualizing themselves as part of that community, never think that they could go there. A few folks dreamed of going there and did make it there, but that was just a dream. It was nothing that they thought they could do tangibly. And then folks talked about their ancestors being buried under Baldwin Hall, which we know about. And they talked about the new burial site and memorial and how the community wasn't consulted at all. And so I want to share this example below. One of our presenters said, in talking about those buried under Baldwin Hall who were then put in the Oconee Hill Cemetery, they said, why would you dig them up and then re-enter them at the feet of the people that owned them? It bothers me, even when I think about that. They needed to be buried with their ancestors. And they talked about how that created a strained relationship because they were not consulted about where their ancestors were buried. So that's disrespect, not only in life, but also in death. And then this same person talked about how a Black family was so generous to donate the granite to the monument and how UGA took that donation. And the person was saying, you know, at a point in time that the university could have paid for what they did, someone then donated and they were able to slide by. And so that contributes to that strained relationship. Quickly, someone talked about a strained relationship in current day by saying, I don't like UGA. I grew up loving the Georgia Bulldogs, grew up admiring UGA. As I got older, I saw the way they just disregard our people. Looking on the inside and seeing how management is making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but these food service workers are barely making a living wage. I don't like that. I despise that. And these two examples are examples of how they experience strained relationships. So I turn it over to Aniya because I want her to share the other parts of our findings.
All right, so our second question was, how do Black communities experience and make meaning of the University of Georgia? So the first thing I want to discuss is the lack of connection in UGA. This is just something that the people that we interviewed kind of their take on it. And from the Freeman family, they said it can be frustrating having gone there and knowing the opportunity for our children and what that degree can mean for them in terms of future opportunity. And also, I didn't have the UGA experience that made me just a diehard UGA fan. I'm proud of my degrees and I love some Georgia football, and I'm proud to say I'm a triple dog, but it's just not that deep level of passion about the institution. It isn't there for me. And so I kind of just want to highlight that this person who said that is an Athens native. And like she said, she's a triple dog. So she spent a lot of time at UGA. And the fact that she doesn't have a connection still is kind of concerning for me, because it's like, you spent all this time here, you know what I'm saying? You spent all this time at the school, you even live in Athens, but to still not feel a connection there, it's just a little disappointing. And then the next slide is still lack of UGA initiative. And the Malcolm family said, I think that the relationship needs to be better and it can't be reciprocal anymore. I think it needs to be more done on the universities and then on the Black families end. And so one thing we learned about this family is that they are also Athens natives. And they said years ago that the school really didn't reach out to high schools or try to get Athens residents to commit. And that was years ago, and it's still like that today. In high school, I don't remember seeing UGA as much or even trying to reach out, trying to promote their school. And don't get me wrong, we do have mentor programs that help out, and students of Athens-Clarke County do take field trips, but I feel like it's deeper than that. It's just not something you can, see a child for a semester. I feel like it's something that has to be continuous. And not only that, but a lot of the residents still don't know about the school. And so our other quotes about the lack of initiative, it's frustrating that so many of our kids are denied the opportunity to mature. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, y'all. Matriculate in a place that is in their backyard. And a place that's parts of it exists because of what was taken from their ancestors. I think that UGA needs to do a better job recruiting students in this area that want to go to UGA. Basically, kids of color. Black children in this area get overlooked or make you feel like, well, god dang, I got a campus right here in my backyard, but I don't really think that they're trying to accept people like me. And reading this quote just makes me think about my friends that I have here that constantly just ask me about, how's UGA and what do they have to offer? What kind of resources they have? And it kind of makes me sad because I wish they could get the same experience as me. And I want to show them like, it's just a whole new world. Like they probably wouldn't even believe it if they were able to see it. And not only that, but a lot of them are like, I just feel like if I applied, I wouldn't get in. And it's like, why not? Like, why do you not feel like you have an opportunity for a school that, like they said, it's right here in our backyard? And not only that, but they seem to feel like it's closed off because, with North Campus, it's kind of like fenced around. So they feel like it's kind of like private from the community, but it's actually a public university. And so this was the take on UGA athletics. So what some people said about the football team. And so Vanessa said, campus was a place that we heard the stories about. It was not a warm, welcoming place. And you would see that. The only time that Black people kind of sort of halfway had a good space was during football time. And then the next quote with Rashid. And we are consuming ourselves with sports and entertainment. Sports and entertainment are no less detrimental than an alcoholic who is taking that bottle every single day, drowning their pain. Sports and entertainment. It has caused our culture and our people in a state of suppression. We can be bad all week long, but Georgia is playing Alabama on Saturday. Let me hype up. Let me get amped up. Let me get myself ready for this game. Let me go buy a Georgia shirt. Now I'm feeling way better. For one day, maybe 2 days, or even the rest of the weekend if Georgia wins. And I just feel like here, it's kind of like this community is pouring love into UGA and into the football team. But it's like we're not getting that same love back. And it's just kind of like heartbreaking because it's like we love Georgia so much. And like, this is all we know. I mean, Athens is a college town. But the fact that, we feel like we don't get that love back is kind of sad. And to go to our study wrap up, which are some examples related to the economic and educational injustices for Black communities in Athens, I just kind of want to highlight what stuck out to me was the low wages from UGA. As you know, Miss Sandra retired, I believe, last year. I had the opportunity to see her in Snelling. She always made my dining hall trips very welcoming. And after she retired, a student here set up a GoFundMe to raise money. And it kind of like, I was kind of confused because I'm like, what, like a GoFundMe? But I also learned that that was not the first time that has happened. This is something that has happened repeatedly. And it made me kind of sad because for somebody who gave so much love and effort and trying to make a student's day better, trying to make it home for them, to know that we have to raise money still after they've worked here for years, it just really hurts my feelings. And now I'm going to pass it to Dr. Breeden.
Yes, and so we have a lot to share. Just as the tip of the iceberg, but we want to stay true to time, and we want to talk to you all about next steps. So we ask you to think about what can you do in your heart, in your head, and with your hands. With your heart, we encourage you to think about why may you not know some of these things, and who benefits from you not knowing? What about your lived experiences allow you not to know? And how can we really name and embrace racial equities and complexities and equitably communities consult with Black communities here? Also with your head, how can we keep the dialogue going? Dr. Lee talks about how can we do community consultations, working directly with the community. Aniya and Tavaria have a Black Athens Tabletop podcast coming soon. We'll have the theatrical performances and dialogues coming this summer. So that will be an opportunity for you to learn and do more. And with your hands, think about what does justice look like here? No programs, how can we focus on systemic changes, reparations, giving folks access to campus, jobs, tuitions, increasing the wages at UGA, ensuring Black businesses here have support and contracts? How can we create sacred spaces, weave Black stories throughout the university's history, and create a culture of reconciliation? And so we'll end and say that the journey continues, the fight continues, but we're in for the ride. And we ask you, what are you going to do? Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much to both of our set of presenters. These were amazing presentations. Thank you so much. I wish we could receive reaction from our audience, but in this format we can't. So excellent job. Thank you so much. So we can take questions from the audience. We have just one in there that's asking for clarification on something. But before I say that, I just want to say these presentations serve as such a beautiful bridge from yesterday, which many of the presentations were looking quite deep into history. And you guys today shifting us into what many of our presentations will be, thinking about the links between history and present and future. So this really was an awesome way to start off the day to sort of connect what we discussed yesterday to what we'll be hearing today. And again, really powerful presentations on two very important topics that I know lots of folks on campus and in our community are thinking about. So thank you. We had one clarification question for our second set of presenters about what a triple dog is. That is definitely UGA jargon, and it is important for understanding that comment and information you presented. Could one of you clarify triple dogs?
Okay, I will. Nice being shy. But yes, a triple dog is someone who has 3 degrees or more from the University of Georgia. So we do have our jargon. We apologize for that. But thank you so much for that question.
Yeah, so definitely an investment in the University of Georgia if you're a triple dog. We also have double dogs. So yes. Okay. We have one question from Amy Ross. I think it's to the whole panel. How can and should faculty promote this work that both of your groups are doing? We can start maybe with Jerry and Aidan. How can faculty sort of help promote and publicize and support this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think that you know one of the important things is kind of who the audiences are. So I know Amy had talked about particularly university administration and how to get that and how to get this in front of university administration. I think that's an important question. It's a difficult question. I think that one of the main thing that in our collaboration, what I've tried to think about is that we are very much in partnership with folks like Hattie, the Linnentown project, and trying to align ourselves with the work that they're doing so that there's kind of a coordinated effort. And a lot of that effort has been at the county government, which then in turn is in conversation with UGA. And I think that's been a productive route so far to do this. I think in terms of promotion of this work, it's tricky, right? Because like this kind of engaged scholarship doesn't always get support in the same way as stuff that's maybe a little more headline worthy for the university. And so I think, this symposium, the fact that Jen, you and others put this together, I think this is a great chance to do that type of work and kind of get the information out there in a way that indirectly at least gets up to a university administration through creating pressure to deal with some of these historical legacies.
So another kind of side of that too, to answer Amy's question, one thing that I have done this past year especially is try and incorporate Linnentown into my own teaching in human geography classes, especially in introducing the history of urbanization in the United States, the history of urban renewal, and really using it to connect it to this broader process, but being something that's really people can connect with. I mean, the freshmen live in those dorms. And I've had students this semester write some term papers thinking about Linnentown. And I think it's really been something that they appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the place they live and the history, and it's been pretty meaningful for them. So I think that's another way to kind of do that as well.
Agreed. And I'll also say by bringing in community folks into your classrooms, talking to community folks about their experiences, it doesn't always have to be us who are leading these conversations because we're not the experts. So I think it's important to center the folks who are here as the experts. I think it's important to amplify and support folks on campus who are already doing this work, who may not get the support, but if you have a seat at the table, help make sure folks get that support. And then just by seeing and encouraging Black students in class, on campus, and knowing that it's hard to be here, but they deserve to be here.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I've discussed Linnentown in classes where it's appropriate and relevant, and the students want to know, they want to hear, even if they're living in those dormitories, they want to walk the site, they want to understand. And yeah, I think the work that several faculty are doing to integrate this into their classes and various conversations is really important. Thank you. Okay, we have another question. Dr. Shannon, did you mention that white residents lived in or near Linnentown? What happened to the homes of these white residents? And what are some of the actions? Let's start with that. So what happened to the homes of these white residents?
So I would say, so yes, there was 2 neighborhoods, and even that section south of Baxter, there were parts around the periphery of that neighborhood that were largely, that were white folks, and that came out during the oral history interviews that we did. But it's primarily that area where like the Special Collections Library is now, that was predominantly white residents. Those homes were generally sold at a higher rate if you go back and look at those slides. Though several were condemned, but as we saw, like the price that they received, even when the eminent domain was being used, was higher than folks in Linnentown received. We haven't tracked where those folks ended up, and so that's a good question to kind of put on the to-do list. But in general, like they fared a lot better than the residents of Linnentown did.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. Why is the University of Georgia so reluctant to recognize and provide redress to the harm they have caused to Linnentown residents and the descendant communities? Just and whoever would like to start to address that.
I mean, I can speak to it. Hattie, I don't know if Hattie, if you want to say anything. We haven't had a chance for you to say anything, but
yeah,
she's on here and she might want to speak to that question. If she is on. I can say something at the beginning.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Would you ask that again?
Yes, Ms. Hattie. Why is UGA so reluctant to recognize the Linnentown situation and work on redress?
That is a good question. We have not, UGA has refused to acknowledge the Justice and Memory team. They have refused to come to the table. They have refused to even apologize for what their involvement on our lives that they played to erase in our community. We know that there are a few of us. It's the elderly now, but and we're not in large numbers. We don't have big donations to give to the university. We're not politicians. So as a result of that, I think they feel like they don't have to.
I mean, I'll just 20 seconds on top of that. I also think, our administration strategy has been very much more let's not dwell in the past and let's look forward in a way that isn't always very productive, right? It's a way that's meant to make folks who have some power institutionally feel comfortable while still say that we're addressing some of the disparities that we see now. And so I think, Linnentown obviously brings up some not very savory parts of the institutional history. It doesn't make UGA look good, and that's just not something that the administration wants to deal with, I think, for various reasons. That's my sense.
And I'm a grad student, so I'll say this, but we also have to remember that white supremacy is seductive. It will make you forget and misremember actual historical facts. It will make you disregard neighborhoods, disregard people's voices so that you can amplify your own agenda. And that's what's happening here. And until we can really name that, we have to start there before we can move forward.
You just can't ignore history when you have residents here telling you what happened.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question that follows nicely on this. What would be one or two concrete steps that the university can take to help Black students feel like they belong and promote equity? So what could students do? And in preparing for this session, I was looking back at the numbers to remind myself that UGA is about 8% Black students when we live in Clarke County. That is 30% Black in a state that's closer to even 33%. And I was thinking about that as being relevant to the second presentation. So what are some steps that the university could take to help Black students feel like they belong here and promote equity?
I'll take this one, but I kind of want to involve the community too with students. And I would say just make it feel welcoming. Cause as a senior, I never got the vibe of wanting to come on campus. I didn't even know that the library here was public and that anybody could go until one of my friends whose parent worked here and she informed me. And I would say just try to reach out and get that information out to more Clarke County students about the school, because something I noticed is a lot of people they don't know what UGA has to offer, and it's so much it's mind blowing to me, and it's right here in our backyard. But I would say for Black students here on campus, kind of just the same thing. Sometimes, most of the times I'm the only Black kid in the room, and it can be very intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. I feel very scared at times, but I feel like if you treat that person you just let them know that you're here for them, and you can talk to me, I don't know, just show some type of love and a welcoming feel, make me want to, build a relationship. And I feel like once you make that effort, and it's a common understanding, people would be, I don't know, more accepting. Cause right now it's kind of, the Blacks do their thing and the whites do their thing. And don't get me wrong, we do mix sometimes, but it's not really a connection. Everybody's kind of just on their own side. So I say, just trying to make everyone feel equally involved and just treat everybody equal.
Thank you for those response. We have about 3 minutes left. I do have a question from Greg Davis, which is another good extension of this conversation. What should the role of the Clarke County School District be to address these inequalities? These are good questions. As someone who has a child in the district, I'm very curious what thoughts might be of the role of this school district.
The role of the school district? Let's see. Well, as I mentioned before, we do have more clubs and stuff that try to get active in the community. And I would say it has helped, but I say it's just deeper than that. I feel like a lot of these people here don't know much about, college. Some of their parents did not go to school, and they don't know what UGA has to offer, outside of going to field trips and things like that. So I feel I don't know. I feel Clarke County should meet with UGA and create some type of partnership or a legit mentor club where you partner a freshman or somebody with a high schooler, or even you could do it with small kids. I say just more community outreach. I feel Clarke County should address things that we need help on, our school system. UGA is one of the top schools. I feel we should be getting more help than what we get. We do have some teachers that come here, but it's not that many. So I say just more people willing to help. But Clarke County should make I don't know, we should have a meeting or something to discuss that.
Thank you to all the panelists. You guys gave such great presentations and really a wonderful discussion afterwards. I think that's a good place to leave it. So we'll have a 15-minute break to transition to the next session. And thank you all so much. Take care.